It's time to work together. We're going to collaborate and promote visibility. But Chris, what are we promoting visibility on?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Right.
A lot of times people are like, wait a minute, do I really want to promote that? Well,
I don't want any eyes on me. No.
I mean, it was such a task just to drag Scott into the studio here,
Yeah.
but he loves coming in here and doing this, and so do I. Glad to have you with us in this episode as we do take a look at one of the other guiding principles: collaborate and promote visibility. Now, what we mean by this is a couple of things. Number one is this tendency to, instead of making everything like top secret and siloed, and we, our team doesn't talk to the other team, or our department doesn't talk to that other department, or our division doesn't work with that division, or this customer group is not that customer group, so we're not just going to, you see, those types of, or that type of philosophy, I should say, I will say, leads to a lot of misunderstanding, loss of value, which of course, being part of ITIL, we don't want that, and it just takes longer, and you produce stuff that is not as good. So where this particular guiding principle really finds its roots, Scott, is in the world of DevOps, right? So those of you who are familiar with the world of DevOps, you might remember that DevOps essentially is two terms: development and operations, right? Dev used to, in the old days, would go and they would create something. We would say they'd sit around, they'd plan, they'd plot, as those of us in operations would say, to create something for the customer. They'd be on these sales calls, and then the marketing team would tell them, you got to do this and got to do that, and they'd create, whether it's a widget or a whatchamacallit or software. And then they would take it, and we used to call it the hand grenade, the holy hand grenade of Antioch, kind of like from the Monty Python thing. They'd pull the pin and they would toss this thing over the wall of confusion between development and operations. Us ops guys and gals would catch it and go, holy cow, what are we going to do with this? And then if it didn't work, or if we had to try to, solve it, or all of a sudden it was like opening up all these cans of worms that we didn't really want to have to deal with. And so there was almost this antagonistic relationship between the development teams and the operation teams. Well, right around I would say the turn of the 2000s into the 2010s or the 20-teens, you saw companies like, especially Spotify, said, hey, what if I can show you that we can do this many releases in this amount of time with this much improvement? And everybody was like, it can't be done. And they demonstrated that it could be done. And then they wrote this kind of fictionalized book called The Phoenix Initiative, which was based on this, fictional company with these groups of people. But it was basically describing the DevOps, or what they would call the third way, the way to do these things in a way that the development people and the operations people would sit side by side into physically co-located spaces, and then all of the information would be put on what they call information radiators, which could be like a Kanban chart on one wall, and then they would have their burn down charts on the other wall, and then they would have velocity indicators over here. And so no matter where you were in that little office space, you could look up and you knew exactly where you were, what was going on, who was in charge of that. And if you needed some help or had a question, instead of having to pop your head over the cube or go down the hall to that office, you just look across the open space desks and say, hey, Scott, I'm wondering, I might want to use this protocol for this software, this API call out. And Scott says, well, that'd be great, Chris, except that port we close on the firewall. So I don't think that's going to work real well. Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, hey, thanks for telling me that now, Scott, and not when we released it to the customer and they're like, this doesn't work anymore, right? So that's just a slight example of just what happens when you tear down that wall of confusion and you make sure that you're able to communicate. So now you can see how DevOps is kind of that world, right? And then, of course, it's turned into DevSecOps because then people are like, wait a minute, remember this promote visibility part? There does need to be certain security in place. So Dev and Sec and Ops, security and operations, now we all talk together and collaborate.
That's right. You know, Chris, it's funny because even little changes that someone might think, oh, this is a good idea, or someone says, hey, this is good, we should move this user interface from here to here, and then the operations team doesn't know, guess what? That could be a disaster for some people because training, routine, customer experience, all of these things. And so, you know, it's so critical to have that promotion and the collaboration with everybody to really get us to where we want to be.
Yeah, you know, as we say, eyes on the prize and eyes on each other. So this is a way for us to help each other out. In other words, if the dev team succeeds, the ops team succeeds. If the ops team is succeeding, the dev team succeeds. And that's, instead of making it more this antagonistic relationship, it's more of a how do we together do things. And I know it sounds like we're maybe back in kindergarten, sitting around the kumbaya circle, right, or something like that. But understand something, and here, this is important as we look at the slide here, is that notice it says that achieving the objectives that you have, right, means that you need to work together across boundaries. So basically getting rid of the silos, but only what is necessary. Notice it says that, reading this, should be, hidden agendas should be avoided and information should be shared to the greatest degree notice possible. Yes, there are certain things that need to remain confidential. Yes, there are certain aspects of the company. For example, we shouldn't be sharing what everybody else makes. So HR shouldn't be like, yeah, let's just make everybody's salaries open to everybody. No, that's not a good idea. That can tend to, because of misunderstandings and not understanding that perspective, that can lead to a lot of, speaking of antagonism, that can lead to a lot of people being very upset. And so that's not something we want to do. Or personal identifiable information. Yeah, people's telephone numbers or their private number. No, we're not talking about that. What we are talking about is whatever the product or service is that we're working on, as much as possible, let's share that information. Let's share that data with each other. So the following things we need to think about. Number one, who are we going to collaborate with? And this comes into, well, who needs to know? We used to, in military, they say, you're on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know, right? That was one my dad always used to say. He says, you're on a need-to-know basis, son, and you don't need to know, which was something funny. It was usually like, where are we going to eat dinner, right? And anyway, I digress. But all that to say is that there are certain things that certain people you do need to collaborate with, and others maybe you don't. Also, communication for improvement. Something that's important is that anytime you're going to say something, it should be with the intent to improve or inform. Because I'm guilty of this. I talk for a living. And so as my friends and family sometimes say, Chris, are you getting paid by the word, or what is going on here? I talk a lot. Well, here's the thing. Sometimes you need to think about, well, what is it that I'm trying to say? Am I informing, right? Am I giving some information that informs somebody on something or can help improve things? Well, that's what communication really needs to be about. So think about that. And then increasing urgency through visibility. I don't know that this is an important thing unless it's visible. And I'll give you an illustration. Let's say that senior management comes down from their ivory tower and comes down to talk to us and says, hey, we've got this great improvement initiative that's coming out, all hands on deck. It's going to be awesome. We're going to invest in this. It's going to be great. And so, Scott, you and I are in on this meeting, and we listen to what the, C-suite, senior vice presidents, they're all there telling us this. And then you hear nothing. There's no emails. There's no, not on the internal websites. Yeah. And so what do we expect? We think, oh, I guess it wasn't anything that needed to be important, right?
Yeah, it's over.
Until the end of the first quarter. And they come to you and go, how's our favorite people doing? And how far have you gotten on this great initiative that we gave to you? And we're like, what initiative? And they're
You were
like,
for real?
Yeah, oh, wow, right? What? In other words, what? If it's not visible, if it's not in front of most people, out of sight,
Out of mind.
out of mind. And so that's what they mean by that. It's, in other words, hey, look, increasing urgency through visibility. If senior management is saying, hey, by the way, Team A and Team B have been doing great work and we're excited about how much that they've accomplished. By the way, Team Charlie and Delta are also doing some work. We can't wait to see what they're coming up with. All of a sudden, what happens? That urgency of like, yeah, this is important. We should be, concentrating on this. We should be working on this. So that's part of what they mean by making sure that you increase urgency through visibility. Okay, let's talk a little bit about applying the collaborate and promote visibility guiding principle. To apply collaborate and promote visibility, there's a couple of things. Number one, and I kind of hinted at this one, I think previously, and that is consensus, right? Collaboration does not mean consensus. If I'm trying to make everybody happy, what happens?
Nobody's happy.
Nobody's happy, right? Including you, because you're not getting anything done. And this is something that I struggle with for a long time. Part of my personality makeup is I like people to get along and to be happy and to be excited about things. And if I see people that are kind of like, nah, I don't agree, there's almost like this part of me that goes, well, I want to solve that for that person. I want you to be happy. Scott, I want you to be excited about this. And here's the thing is, there's going to be certain things that just Scott's not going to be happy about. And there's going to be certain things that I'm not going to be happy about. And there's going to be times when you're going to notice that the things that sometimes you lose on, maybe there's a decision that needs to be made and we all get together as a team and we're sitting and we're collaborating and promoting visibility and that's great. And someone says, yeah, we're going to use this software. And someone says, oh, no, I don't like that software. I used that software before and and then we ask, well, why don't you like it? I just don't like it. Okay. How about anybody else have a bad experience? And everyone's like, no, actually it works great for us. Well, sorry, Bob, we're not going to use, we're going to use the software. Well, here's the thing. Bob might be like, oh, great. But guess what? The next time we're talking about a different piece of software. And now Bob's like, hey, we should really use this software. And I'm the one that goes, I don't really know. I don't feel like that. When I don't have any good reason, or maybe I do, but then everyone says, yeah, collectively, we probably should do this. Now, this doesn't mean that you vote. I know I've had one student go, does that mean you just go to every meeting and vote on? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is collectively you've heard all the voices. And then, Scott, you then have to either, depending on how your organizations run, you need to make executive decisions or whoever the team leaders are going to make those decisions. And then you move on. You have to say that, hey, guess what? Not everybody was unanimous about this. That's okay. Collaboration does not mean consensus. That's the first one. Okay, next up, we see that communicate in a way the audience can hear. And I love this one because when presenting and creating content over the years and writing blogs and white papers and also research papers, where I know you both and I, master's degree thing, and where you write things and you find out that every audience likes to hear things in a certain way.
Absolutely.
So, for example, if I was coming to Scott and he's our president, CEO, and chief Pumbaa. And that's a title change that we want to make right there. You like that? Yeah. You get a hat too that you get to wear with it. Maybe. He's like, no, that's not happening. If I come to you and you're in the middle of something, and I say, hey, I want to share something with you, boss. And I go and I whip out this big, huge chart when there's several pages with spreadsheet after spreadsheet, and you're like, what are you doing? Because as the boss, he's got all these other things going on, and if I'm going to take an hour of his time showing him intricate details, he's probably going to tell me something. Chris, let's get to the point. Get to the point, and let's. Can you just give me 5 bullet points, or give me something, because my time is very valuable because he's got a lot of moving parts, right? And so we used to say senior management likes elevator pitches, like very short, sweet, to the point, graphs and pictures so they can kind of see things quickly and understand it. Whereas if you go down to the engineers that are doing the intricate details, if you just give them a PowerPoint with 4 or 5 slides, they're going to be like, I need more detail. They love the Excel spreadsheets with 150 rows and 1,000 columns worth of material because that's where they live. So we communicate in a way the audience wants to hear. Finally, decisions can only be made on visible data, and this comes under that promote visibility. One of the things we need to think about is that having data to measure is better and to maybe even, I would say, discount is better than having no data at all. In other words, we should at least get some data to look at, and we can then debate and decide on whether it's good, because if you just go, well, I don't think Scott needs to know that. Well, why don't I let Scott make that decision to go, hey, Scott, I've got this, this white paper, you want to look at it? And he's like, nah, I don't need it. Whereas if I didn't give it to him and he had to make a major decision for the company, you see where I'm going with this, right? You need to ask, and that's that promoting visibility. Hey, you interested in this? No. Or Scott could maybe say, hey, gang, working with me, this is really helpful for me if you can do this, this, this. Mm-hmm. I now know that, and so anytime I give him a report or an email, he knows that he's going to get something that it's not going to be, War and Peace. It's going to be nice, concise, and get to the point. So that's something to do. Now, one last little bit of information, and this is something interesting, especially for those of you who are taking the exam. When you're sitting in the small, well-lit room, after spending a large amount of money to answer questions on a computer screen, aka the exam, one thing that you need to understand is that when you don't have visibility of work, that can lead to poor decision making. And part of that is by not understanding how communication occurs, the type of processes that you have, and even, who, like organizational charts, who reports to who. Not knowing that information can lead to unfortunate things. We would say, like, how to understand the flow of work in progress. Like, oh, well, this team works, and then they hand it off to that team, and then they hand it off to that team. Well, again, if Scott comes in as kind of like the overall project lead, he needs to kind of see where we're at in the timeline. Well, he might go, oh, well, I know who to talk to. I know who to discuss with that because it's visible. I can see it. The other thing that this comes into, and I want you to understand this, is anytime they're asking about which guiding principle helps uncover waste or identifies bottlenecks, well, that's going to be collaborate and promote visibility. Part of the reason why is because of the promotion of value stream mapping. Value stream mapping is huge. It comes from Lean. You might remember in the Toyota production system, or TPS. And so what it does is it says we need to get rid of, in a Japanese term, muda, which means waste. And it means, and there's actually a couple other words, mura, muri, and all of these Japanese words, they mean wasteful. Some mean that you've overburdened something, and so that's wasting the resource. Or underutilization of resources is also a waste. Or bottlenecks, where you have a lot of something coming, it stops right here while this person takes care of it, and then meanwhile you have people waiting over here. That's also waste. So velocity and how fast things move. Well, by using collaborating, promote visibility, you help by using, whether it's value stream mapping or there are other techniques out there you can use to identify how does work happen. Flow charts, flow diagram, whatever it is. I get to now see, Scott, how things work. I have now made it visible. That helps us collaborate better.
It absolutely will help you collaborate better. And luckily for all of us, we're not paying Chris by the word. So with that, we are going to move on to our next module where we're going to talk about thinking and working holistically and also keeping things simple. We'll see you over there.